two things at the same time. So, hello world. We are here live with Kieran Rose, discussing parenthood and autistic identity and how the things combine and overlap. But as we were just saying, we'll probably have a little bit of a chin wag and try to not veer too much off topic. For any of you watching live, do feel free to pop some questions in the box, and Jules is going to watch it for me, because my brain won't allow me to get into it. Hi Rachel.
Hi Rachel. You're right.
We're live already, so we're sitting up on the page now. So our first question, do you think that being aware of your autistic identity before entering parenthood helps you to prepare?
Oh, from personal opinion, it didn't, only because I still didn't really know much about autism at that point. But I would imagine that if you were very knowledgeable about yourself and understood yourself very well and understood your sensory self as well, I would imagine that would have a great deal of impact on, you being able to put things in place that would support you and help you. I mean, you can't anticipate everything, because unless you've had a child, you don't know what it's like to have a child. And obviously I am not privy to the actual giving birth to the child, so what that will be like as a sensory experience, I would have no idea. But coming after that, the kind of, like sleepless nights, for me personally, around things like touch and stuff, where you are literally skin to skin with a baby a lot of the time, and that's not a very comfortable experience for me. So kind of knowing I would need to build in stuff around that would have helped immensely. So I guess, so just kind of being probably sensory aware for the most part, and also burnout as well, because that's a massive change in routine. Having a baby is like someone's just taken your routine and dropped a nuclear bomb on it, and now you're having to adhere to this small squalling creature's routine. And as they get older as well, the different, like you can't have routines as an autistic parent, really, because your children are constantly changing stuff every day and pulling the rug out from underneath you, and the things that you put in you plan for, you can't access and stuff like that. So if I'd been able to anticipate all those things, I might not have actually had children. Thinking about how much of it, it might have scared me actually quite a lot, but going into that knowingly would have enabled me, I think, to have looked after myself better. And I really could have benefited from that at the time.
We hear from quite a lot of autistic parents who discovered their autistic nature in parenthood because they burnt out. Because they tried to parent like everybody else parents, and they weren't able to do it, and they reached a mental health crisis quite often, and that's how they've discovered their autism. And I can see absolutely what you're saying, with the sensory experience and the demands and the routine. I kind of got around it. I call my approach to parenting the Tao of parenting. That I pretty much do like low resistance to everything. That I just go, the only way the baby will sleep all night is if it sleeps in bed with me. Right, guess we're going to do that. Baby will stay quiet if I just give it access to the boob 24/7. I'll just do that. But it does open you up to judgment, but it did definitely make my parenting journey easier. I just went, there's only one way we're going to do this, and that's the baby's way. So I'll just do it that way. But that can be quite challenging, can't it? To surrender. I'm not on the whole, I'm not a good surrenderer, but
I think as well, knowing kind of what to expect in terms of butting up against services and things like that, and even thinking ahead to kind of, from a baby to education, you think that 4 or 5 year period is actually quite a long time, but it isn't. It flies by. And you're kind of walking into everything blind all the time. You don't know who you're going to be coming up against, or who's going to be good and supportive of you and who isn't, and how those systems work, and navigating all that stuff is an extra complicated. I mean, I saw something the other day that was saying, like that a parent of any kind of disabled child within the education system is usually battling on about 6 or 7 different fronts at any given time. But when you are doing that and you're also disabled yourself,
Yeah.
those two things are really, really difficult to kind of to weigh up. And the amount of energy that you have to put into just getting out of bed in the morning to face all of this kind of stuff, and all of that as well. If supports around that, forward supports, forward thinking supports around those kind of things, and people to help you step by step through those processes would be incredible. So
Yeah.
it's not just about having a baby, is it? It's about kind of all of that kind of stuff is all kind of wrapped up into one thing, that it's all unexpected and it's all about change.
Yes. Yeah, the unexpected nature of it, and as you say, and of course, especially for those first 5 years, it does slow down a bit after they get 5, but for especially the first 5 years, the rapid nature of change. I found with all of my babies, every time I thought, oh, okay, I'm cool, I'm in my groove, I know what we're doing, they grow. And then you go, oh, this is something different. And even having, I had lots of babies. I got four children. Even having 4 children, by the time you have the fourth, you go, I got this off pat. I can do babies. And she still throws stuff at me all the time that I go, oh, what do I do with that? None of my other babies did that. And it happens a lot, doesn't it? That rapid nature of change. And that's just... that's without, as you say, that involvement with potentially unsupportive and even potentially what's the word I'm looking for, that they actually make your life harder. Butting up against those services. We did have some questions about services. Let me scan down a little bit. What did you think about sharing as an autistic adult? What did you think about sharing your own autistic identity with professionals? Do you think that it's a good idea or not? Or
it's a double-edged sword, really. And this is going to sound really, really negative, but in a way it kind of doesn't matter to some degree, because they're still going to treat you as a parent and not as a knowledgeable source of information about a child that they're supporting. There's a subtle difference there, but it's a very big difference. From my own perspective, early on, I maybe wasn't as understanding of the narratives around autism and stuff as well. So I might say that I was autistic and that's where it would stop. Now I'm at a point where it's the first thing that happens when I come into the room. So I'm an autistic person. If that's, around my children as well, I've got 2 autistic children. We've got 3 children, 2 of them are diagnosed with autistic. So usually with professionals, it's something related to them being autistic. So I lead with that, first of all, that I'm autistic, I'm an autism professional, that I've got research and stuff. So it's kind of, I set myself up before I've even got there as a kind of, I'm on an equal par with you. Sometimes that works. Sometimes they get defensive before we've gone anywhere. But again, it depends on who you're talking to as well. So it should be that as a parent, we are first and foremost the greatest sources of knowledge about our children and information for professionals. That's first and foremost. Also, if you've got autistic children and you are yourself autistic, then that should add an extra level to that, because you have an innate knowledge not only of them being autistic, but of your own autistic nature and the combination of the two of you as well. So that should all be banking into everything. But unfortunately, often it doesn't. Unfortunately, it's actually stigmatizing, and the perception of you changes sometimes when you make that announcement, when you say that you're autistic, and you get treated differently and usually negatively. And it's greatly concerning that we have huge instances of FII being put towards autistic parents, particularly autistic mums, mums generally, with SEND kids, but autistic mums particularly. And there's just a lot of gaslighting goes on, and it comes from a place of not understanding that autism isn't a deficit-based disorder. It's a cultural difference. And it's really important that professionals understand that, and most of them don't. That we have our own social norms, we have our own way of communicating, we have our own way of moving and thinking and feeling and processing information, and that's relatable and shared amongst all of us, but professionals seem to have missed that bit out. So there's an assumption that we're incompetent. There's an assumption that because we're not acting like non-autistic people, that therefore there's something wrong, and all of those kind of things. So yeah, it's it very much depends on how confident you are, how knowledgeable you are, and who you're dealing with. I think those three factors are probably the key ones.
Yeah. Do you find that you script before major appointments, before you know that you're going to be going in with certain professionals? Do you?
Definitely. I mean, now I used to script. I used to script more. Now I actually literally script, as in write things down, as in go in with lists of questions and try to anticipate what they're going to ask and have the answers ready for them and stuff like that. Because it's like anything. You go to any appointment with a professional, and quite often you get disarmed really easily. And there's a power dynamic there, which usually you're at the bottom end of. And that can make you anxious. And when you're anxious, you might not say things in the right way that you meant to, or you might forget things. So I think it's really, really important not only to get your script in your head ready, but also to get your script literally written down on a piece of paper, so that if they say to you, what about this? And you can't answer, you can go, there you go, I've written it for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't like that, but it's we have to do the best with what we can. And that's
absolutely. I completely empathize. I actually personally have minimal appointments with professionals because I just duck out of the system as much as I can, as I say, down with parenting. But for those that I do, I lose my cool very, very quickly, and that power dynamic really gets me. I find it very, very hard to be myself. That I find myself infantilizing myself. That I go very small, and I find it very hard. And then I leave and I go, I had all these things I was going to ask, and I was going to, do this and do that, and I didn't. Why didn't I? And on reflection, I can see I also tend to, as a lot of autistic women, especially autistic women or people assigned female at birth, I tend to go into fawn. That I become a real people pleaser, and then I leave and go, but they were horrible. Why did I fall to them? I don't want them to like me. But it takes
sometimes it's like a bit of, when like the whole analogy about watching a car crash and it goes in slow motion, and it's sometimes being at appointments with professionals is exactly like that. That they can say sometimes nice things, sometimes awful things, and it's like you're not even there. You dissociate from it, and you're kind of watching yourself, you helicopter view and watch yourself actually having that conversation and acting like that. And it's like you've got no control over yourself at all. And it's a really kind of bizarre, but a lot, again, I think that comes down to trauma and anxiety. That comes down to years of being invalidated and gaslighted. It's, often unwittingly invalidated and gaslighted, but it still happens. It's, it's just, it's conditioning, isn't it? To kind of react to a hierarchy like that. And there is a perceived hierarchy when you go in, and you automatically go into kind of form, and you tell them what they want to hear. And that's the hardest thing.
And then you leave and go, but I didn't want to say that. I wanted to support, and I didn't ask, and now they're not going to give me any because I haven't properly asked for it. Rachel, what did you want to ask, darling? Sorry, me and Kieran were.
That's okay. No, it's okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hiya, Kieran. My name's
Hi.
Rachel. I am now stalling. I made a list of from what you were talking about in relation to the professionals and things they were saying, because I got bitten, not literally by a health visitor, because that would just be weird, but it was very much a not believing me, saying why so late. Well, because if I'm autistic, then what his behaviors aren't going to be alien to me, and so that kind of experience shook me into right, you can't trust all professionals, you've got to question them. So I then sort of put together a list of things that I'd said that I found really helped. Have you got something like that that you'd be happy to share with us at all, please?
I haven't ever made a kind of a list like that, but it's definitely certainly worth thinking about. And I'll be happy to talk to you guys about actually putting something together like that, because I think a lot of parents would find that really useful.
Yes, absolutely.
So kind of to go in armed and preempting kind of what people are going to ask, and you know, and it isn't even really about masking, is it? It's that it's not that you want to go in and mask in that situation. You just don't want to set them off. And that's a really weird thing to say about dealing with someone who's coming to support you, but it seems to happen quite often.
I think it's their value-laden symbolic web, their filter, and that they, there seems to be this sort of, what's the word? Like love is intangible, this intangible hierarchy that doesn't really make sense to me. But I see people going all like, oh, it's the doctor, blah, blah, blah. Whereas I just going, hi, okay, yeah, I've had a good day. But I talk to them just like I would anybody else and make jokes like I do with anybody else. And I think that's probably why I felt quite comfortable speaking to the head of my son's school. I'd never met him before, and it was a meeting. And he just said, we do have 26 other children to educate, think of here. Because I was just going on about stuff, doing my info dump as any good autistic person would. And he said that, and I went, yeah, but I don't have any control over them. The only person I have control over or any influence over is my son. So with all due respect, that's what I'm doing. And he didn't know what to say. And I was just sort of thinking, maybe nobody said this before, I don't know. But I think I'm the first parent to go into this school and ruffle a few feathers, as in about autism. And I've ruffled a few feathers of parents. But I'm there not to make friends. I'm there to fight his corner. So that's why I was thinking, other people who are probably not quite as happy to push those comfort zones as maybe I am. That if you had these sort of, I don't know whether you have them as a list or cards or whatever, however people wanted them to be, to take to meetings where they've got like an EHCP meeting or an ILP meeting or a initiating school or whatever, that kind of thing, that I think that, or anything in any sort of context really, but especially with GPs, that seems to be another thing that I've had a few problems with, is and also going to the vets as well. That's another place where problems have happened, where my son's stimming on things and the vet starts to get aggressive with my son, and I'm like, he's autistic, and then he doesn't make any change to still getting aggressive, and I'm like, yeah, he's anxious, and you being aggressive is not going to make it better or go away. So again, it's just like these kind of things. But anyway, I'm going to shut up.
No, it's fab. This is what we wanted, is to share the experiences of autistic adults, autistic parents as well, and to have a few different hacks as such, isn't it? It's sometimes it's hacking your own neurology and hacking your own life and understanding the areas where you wouldn't be able to meet the socially expected standard of walking into an appointment and just saying what you wanted to say and walking out with what you want to walk out with, and how can we get around that, because we still need to attend the appointments. And the end, the ultimate answer, isn't it, with so much of that stuff, is that society needs to understand us more. And some of those things, where you're saying that you're butting heads with a health visitor, is that your health visitor is judging you as a mother and your children and your family dynamic from a neurotypical standard. And when professionals are walking into our homes and they're making these judgments, they're probably going to find us lacking. And actually it's not. It's that we've got gorgeous autistic homes that meet our needs and meet our children's needs.
Yes, exactly.
Tick all of our boxes, and everybody's happy and settled, and all the rest of it. But when you're looking at your tick sheet, that the health visitors literally have a tick sheet, they're missing, your child's missing all these milestones, and you're not doing this and you're not doing that. Well, no, because that wouldn't work for us. I don't do Play-Doh with my children, because the touch of Play-Doh makes me want to rip my own eyes out. I'm
like that with sand pit. Come on, mummy, play in the sand.
Who thought that was a toy?
I know. And what's that other sand that you can actually mould? You can actually mould it. And I was just like this, going, you bought it for his birthday. Is this? Do you not like him? Is this torture? Is this actually Is this actually a, you know, covert message of we don't like you?
It's that kind of thing, isn't it? It's that kind of thing that I'm sure that if professionals saw how much screen time my kids had, they'd absolutely balk. But for my kids, that's an enormous regulatory activity. You know,
and it allows you to do stuff.
Well,
can you imagine trying to chase around all the time? I think I'd just basically be nuclear. I'd be glowing so much they could plug me into the national grid, and you know the planet would be safe. There'd be no global warming. It would be horrific. It would not be. It wouldn't be a pleasure. I think I'd go insane. You know, I have felt that time where you're teetering on the edge of insanity, and
but
luckily, you know. I think you've fallen the right way.
Yeah, I think sometimes this is what we see. I've got some questions for Kieran about positive autistic identity. Let's do those, and I'll come back.
Please. Yeah.
A live Q&A with me. This is live Q&A with Kieran. I'm not special.
Neither am I, please.
What did you just say, Kieran?
I said I'm not special either. So.
It depends on the label, isn't it?
And then that's not what your mum says. Yeah.
So in with all of this, quite often, you know, with these appointments that we're talking about with professionals, you've probably got a reasonable chance that your children will be with you. Equally, your children, if your children are also autistic, may be aware of their differences within school or within any other social setting. How do you maintain a positive autistic identity at home when you know, when you might be belittled or infantilized in front of your children in these meetings, when your children might be frequently othered in larger society? How do you stay positive and keep your own positive autistic identity and your children's?
It's obviously a very difficult thing, but it's a lot of this is about balance, and that's just partly what kind of Rachel said as well about what you guys were talking about life hacks as well. So when you are with professionals, if there is any way that you can conserve your energy, your mental health by navigating those as quick and efficiently as possible, that's going to help you first of all. But in terms of kind of when you are being gaslit and infantilized, I mean, certainly I take my children to the minimal amount of appointments that I need to take them to. They don't need to be there for everything unless it's directly referring to them and they're going to be going there and advocating for themselves. But secondary kind of to that is about that balance, and I always make sure that I've got a solid group of autistic friends. Some of them live locally, some of them live very, very far away, the other side of the world, but I talk to them all the time. And I always make sure, like, we always talk about our own kind of private lives and appointments that we're going to and stuff. So I have venting space so that I can come away from appointments and be able to just, like, literally what Rachel said, like info dump at someone, not even expect a reply. I don't expect replies from everybody, but it's enough that we all know that we can just drop stuff on someone and that someone's read it. And that's enough sometimes just to kind of counter that awfulness that you experience afterwards and the flatness that you experience. And, you know, obviously we've been under lockdown for about 400 years now. So it's difficult being around, you know, not being able to access the usual kind of support networks that we would normally access. That's family, that's friends that we do have and stuff. And, but in normal times when we are able to access those things, being around autistic people is re-energizing. And actually being around my kids is re-energizing a lot as well. When I've come from a negative space and I come in and I know that I can sit down next to my daughter and she can talk to me about wildcraft for an hour, or one of my other boys who can talk about Minecraft or whatever it is that they're doing. And, you know, so that it's a kind of, it's resetting my safety switch so that I know I'm back in a safe environment with safe people, that I'm left that unsafe environment behind. And that's a kind of reminder to me that I know who my kin are. And I know who is safe to me, and I know that that's my bubble and that no one can access it unless I want them to, and I control the sensory environment and all of those kind of things to make it work for all of us. And it's kind of just balancing it with that, because otherwise your mental health would just fall flat.
Yeah.
And, you know, I am very, very open and honest with my children, as I'm sure probably all of you are. We kind of tend to have different relationships with our kids than non-autistic families do, in terms of we have open conversations about lots of heavy topics. We aren't hierarchical. It's more of a parallel kind of.
Just, I was going to say, it's the hierarchy, isn't it?
Yeah,
But it isn't there.
Yeah, completely. And it's not about like, I'm dad, so I'm going to dominate everything you do. That's not how we work. It's obviously there are things where mum and dad have to make decisions over, and kids have to like that or lump that because there's boundaries. But for the most part, it's about having that hierarchical relationship and talking to my children like they're human beings. Which is often something that lots of people forget about their children. They think they're small, malleable bits of Play-Doh, really, sometimes, I think, and forget that they are people. And they are individual people with individual thoughts and feelings who need to be validated, as are we as adults. So I come away from negative experiences like with those that I've had with professionals and things. And I talk to my children about those things as well. I'm not completely honest and give them the bare bones of everything, but enough to say, look, there are people in this world that you're going to use it as a learning experience. There are people in this world that you're going to come up against who are supposed to help you, and they won't. And they won't because they're bigoted, they're biased, they believe in myths, they've got confirmation bias, all of these kind of things, or it's about money and lack of training, and that you have to be aware that those people exist, and they're going to make your life harder because they're making my life harder right now. And if I'm a bit grumpy, if I'm a bit upset, it's because I've just had one of those experiences and it wasn't nice. So again, it's about finding that balance, but using it as well to kind of reframe it as a kind of, what can we take out of that as much as what was bad about that.
And won't it be lovely if we've got a generation of autistic children being raised by autistic parents who are already, those first appointments, 16, 17, 18, they're walking in with the tool set that we've given them, that we've created, and they're walking in so much stronger than we did, having to learn it from the ground up.
And then
their Ruth is about them framing their identity in a positive way. It's about them utilizing their strengths and knowing that they have strengths, which is something that we were denied as children, quite a lot of us, that we were talked about as the things that we did wrong all the time and the problems that we caused and all of that. That's common for most of us. And that we get stigmatized and traumatized to the point that we have to pretend to be someone else and project and accept something that's pleasing for other people and not for us. And that's a really awful thing to do. So that our children have the chance, or at least our children's children have the chance, to not have to do that as much. And it will get better and better over time. Things are changing all the time. Glacial, it's going really, really slowly. You might look at it and it might not look like it's moving, but it is moving. Things are changing. And I think if we came to this it's going to sound horrible, but in 50 years time, which is a long time away, but I think we'd be having a different conversation then, as we would have done if we'd been having this conversation 50 years ago. So so things are progressing, they are changing, they're just not going as quickly as we need them to.
And that, I mean, that's the way with so much, isn't it, at the moment, that we wish things could change faster. Jules, what was the Facebook question?
So we've had quite a few Facebook questions and comments. I'll do a few comments first about the being with a new baby. Paul says, that's why I carried my baby all the time. Same. Caroline Jordan Kimry, breastfeeding was such a crazy sensory experience. That one, everyone kept saying I was supposed to look into my baby's eyes and make a connection. I felt I was doing everything wrong because that felt so awful to me. In fact, it felt like everything my kid and I did naturally, the NTs told me was wrong. It's such a relief to find out I was autistic years later after kids' diagnosis, to be able to look back and recognise we just did things autistically.
Gorgeous.
Completely.
You see, even I'll jump in there just because my other job, my actual main job is around birth and breastfeeding. I'm an antenatal educator, and you see even in completely NT spaces that this expectation that for every single time you breastfeed your child, or even bottle feed your child, and for the entire feed you're meant to be gazing at your baby. Now, I love babies, like genuinely, I had 4 of them voluntarily. I love babies, but babies on the whole are fairly boring. They like, you've looked at their face and you've gone, yeah, you're gorgeous, I love you loads, yeah, But do you know what? Facebook is more entertaining than you, and so is Netflix. So as long as you're quite happy and you know that I'm here, and if you move or make a change, then I'll engage with you. But if you're not needing me, then I'm grown up. You know, I'd quite like some grown up entertainment while I'm entertaining you with my body. I don't get, and I see this even in NT spaces of NT parents saying, I don't think so. I'm not just going to gaze at my child. Babies might breastfeed like 8 to 12 times in a 24-hour period, 20 to 40 minutes each. That's a lot of baby gazing.
They're not a Picasso. They look like Brussels sprouts at the end of the day, don't they?
Exactly. And
would you stare at a Brussels sprout for 8 hours a day? No, you wouldn't.
No. Even if you were feeding it with your body, you still wouldn't want to be looking at it. Netflix is still more entertaining. It is a very
that's
strange
also inherently ableist as well, because for many of us, staring at something for a long period of time is not achievable.
No.
Because our brains just don't work like that. Our brains are attention focused. So if our brain isn't able to attend onto that face, as lovely as it might be, then we're going to drift off and lose interest really, really quickly. And that's not an insult to that baby. That's just how our brains work, that we need to be engaged in doing something else in order to be able to do the things that we need to do. So yeah, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Agree.
It's a mum shaming thing.
It is.
Yeah, I definitely can agree, because I felt like a total failure for not being able to do the breastfeeding thing.
My wife did as well.
That I suffered from every single possible thing you could get with breastfeeding, the mastitis, the throat and the boob. I didn't even know you could get that, and everything. He had tongue tie, so it was going to be a hard journey anyway. Find that the fact that there just wasn't that connection with the breastfeeding, everyone kept saying, "Oh, but it's such a lovely experience and the connection that you'll get," and it just wasn't doing anything for me. But finding out I was autistic and reading that comment just now just put that together for me. So thanks, Caroline.
For those who are curious, there is a specific Facebook page for breastfeeding parents, breastfeeding autistic parents, to have specific support in that area, because sensory overload is so common, because it is mind-blowingly sensory overwhelming to breastfeed. So we do have specific challenges as autistic parents who are feeding their babies as well. Yeah, sorry, I just thought
no, not sorry at all, because these are the things that non-autistic people do not understand. Yeah. They do not know that we have extra challenges that they do not have.
Yeah,
it's really important that they know these things.
Yeah, and that we know them as well.
Exactly, because we're not privy to this kind of stuff unless it happens. So
exactly, it's only when you connect. Sorry, Rachel, go on.
No, it's okay. Are you okay?
I was just going to say, it's only when you connect with your neurokin and they say, "Hey, that was like that for me too." Oh, this is just my experience. This is what I did. That you go, oh, oh, it's not me.
And that's incredibly validating, but it's also a little bit too late as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unless you're planning on having more children or whatever the example is. Usually it happens after the event that you find out there was another way you could have done things, and it's so important that information is out there.
Yeah. I'll put in the comments afterwards. I'll put a link to that group, and there is also a really lovely article that was put in the I think it was in the ABM magazine a few years ago, written by an autistic breastfeeding peer supporter from an autistic viewpoint, specifically about infant feeding. So I'll pop those in the comments afterwards for anybody that's curious. Sorry, go on, Jules, with any more questions.
Question from Inga Richardson: How can you ask a professional what they really know? If you say, "Do they understand autism? What's your training?" How do you ask that without irritating?
It's to a degree, it probably doesn't matter what their training is, because you will know very quickly if they understand what they're talking about or if they don't. It's something that
questions.
Yeah, it's you only need a 5-minute conversation with someone to know whether they're talking about autism in the right way or not. The language that they use, the way that they deliver information, the information they deliver, the questions that they ask, all of those are indicators of whether that person is a useful person or whether they're a safe person or not. I mean, there are multiple training courses that people can go on, and they are generally awful and superficial and stereotypical. There are people who have postdoctorate degrees and in autism who are PhDs and are doctors who haven't got the first idea what they're talking about. So qualifications really aren't really as important as knowledge and as a measure of a person as well, in terms of whether they are someone who is open to understanding and open to learning and listening to you, or whether they're just talking over you and acting like, you know, they're the professional and I'm the most important person in the room kind of thing. And you will meet different people of different strokes, of different knowledge bases. But sadly, for the most part, and this is like, this whole thing sounded like really professional bashing, and it isn't, because there are wonderful professionals out there who do have reams of knowledge and will go to the ends of the earth to help people. But sadly, the majority are undertrained and don't have a clue.
Undertrained and overconfident.
Sorry, Rachel?
Yeah, about what you said. I'm just thinking, it's almost as if, I mean, this is the conclusion that I've come to, is that as a professional, they might feel obliged to offer advice on something that they don't fully understand, because they worry about how it makes them look, you know, like maybe it's an ego thing or a professional, I should know this. But then I always say to people, like, know your place, you know, stay in lane. If you really don't know, and the advice that you're going to give, you know, could be potentially dangerous, then that's when you need to go, all right, you know, I'm going to be professional about this and say, this is not my subject that I'm, you know, confident in. I've not got a good command in, but I do have other contacts that I can signpost to. That's something that I'd like to, you know, kind of encourage professionals to feel that they are safe to do that, but it doesn't affect their, you know, their professional status that they are obviously very protective of, but to also be aware of, you know, repercussions and the consequences of sharing information that isn't necessarily correct, you know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. I mean, the best professionals that I've ever worked with are the ones that put their hands up and say, I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
I need to go and find out more. Can you point me in the right direction? You know, that recognize that someone coming in and talking about autism in a way that they don't recognize is actually a learning experience and not and not something to feel defensive about or attacked about. And unfortunately, it's so many, particularly of older generation. I work with a lot of psychologists, occupational therapists, and speech and language therapists, and this isn't being disparaging to people who are kind of in their 50s and above at all, or even their 40s and above. I am in my 40s, but many people kind of get their initial training, and that's the foundation of their knowledge. And other knowledge comes in, they might get put in front of the right people who are saying the right things, they might read the right research papers, they might talk to the right people, but that foundation of knowledge is still there. That's their confirmation bias. And if nothing matches with that confirmation bias, it just gets dropped by the wayside. So they're always coming back to the same things. Now that means that if they picked up their confirmation bias in 1985, that's where they still are. You know, and then they're working within systems that are built around all this myth and antiquated knowledge as well, which reinforces them all the time. And those systems are built to be efficient, cost effective. They're not about meeting individual needs. So everything is being pushed towards this minimalistic, superficial understanding of autism that's usually entrenched in 10 or 20 years of old knowledge that's been thrown out the window by now. So, you know, you can still go to a CAMS appointment today and they will talk to you about theory of mind, which was debunked 15 years ago. So, you know, you can't battle against that. So again, it comes down to that kind of individual professional and how willing they are to learn and expand on their knowledge. And it does happen. You do meet them. I met lots of them. They're lovely people. Most of them turn out to be neurodivergent in some way. But I don't know what that says. But, you know, it's... And also the other thing with that is that it's, as a non-autistic person, we talk about empathy a lot. All of us talk about empathy a lot. We're trying to debunk the fact that we don't have empathy when we do. Professionals are still talking about the fact that we don't have empathy when we do. But it is impossible for any group to step into the shoes of another group.
Yeah.
Because you cannot perceive the things that they have experienced. You don't have the internal experience. You can't give anything like that. All you can do is observe.
Yeah.
And
Like
that's
being
what
a parent.
Exactly. You know, we can talk about the things that our children do, but we don't know the intrinsic motivations of why our children do things. We can guess at those things, and we know we can make good educated guesses on those things, but ultimately we don't know what's going on in here.
No.
And it's the same with us as a group, as autistic people. Non-autistic people have been observing us for the past nearly century and are still making huge mistakes, because everything, like you said earlier, Ruth, is framed from through a non-autistic lens. Everything is framed from their bias, from their perspective. Even the way that they measure us, they diagnose us by holding us up against them. And then obviously we fail because we're not like them.
Places in environments as well that aren't meeting needs, so we're going to be anxious, therefore not performing as a relaxed autistic person, you know.
Absolutely.
Fish out of water.
It's not a true representation of who a person is, and that's the whole problem of this whole narrative, and the fact that literally for the last 100 years we've been excluded from that narrative as well. It's only now that we're kind of making little bits of inroads and things, and the changes in research in the last 5 years has been phenomenal, and that's because of autistic researchers who are changing those narratives and who are researching the avenues that non-autistic researchers didn't even think about looking into, and didn't even know that those things existed. I mean, you know that I'm like, masking is my thing. We've been talking about masking as a community for the last 40 years, and research is 5 years old. What does that tell you?
And again, you'll bump into many professionals who have little to no knowledge about masking. I've got a good friend who has got an autistic son, who was told that he couldn't possibly be autistic because he didn't act autistic enough at school, because autism is pervasive and he would act autistic everywhere. And the criteria that the teachers are ticking him against is, you know, incredibly deficit based, incredibly limited, you know, antiquated, all the rest of it. And B, it's just showing absolutely no understanding of masking. And even when my friend is saying, well, he comes out of the school gates and will quite often have meltdowns on the way home. That's your problem then, isn't it? That's your, and I think this is so common, you know, that this is such a common thing that parents are experiencing. If they melt down with you, it's because you're not doing it right. And then again, if the professionals enter our environment and again, they're judging us by their neurotypical standards, well, we can see that you're not doing it right because that isn't how you parent. No, that isn't how you parent. That's different. It is how I parent. I'm doing a good job.
The frustrating thing with all of that, though, is that the information is out there and it's freely accessible. On the most part, it's, you know, that you can go on training courses by autistic people that cost pennies. Really, in the grand scheme of things, that there's so much wealth of information out there. There's research papers out there now, and yet the same barriers keep getting hit over and over and over. And it's like I said, it comes back to that confirmation bias, that they don't want to take on that information because it's too hard to make changes around that information, because they've been doing things in that way for such a long time that it's just easier to stay in your rut than it is to move.
Is that not liking change and rigid thinking?
Well, I mean, indeed. But it can also be challenging. The trouble is with any of us, is that if you come up against something where I might have actually been doing this wrong for quite a long time, and I might have inadvertently been causing quite a lot of harm and damage for quite a long time by doing this wrong, to turn that vehicle around to, I'm going to admit that I've been doing this wrong, and I'm going to do what I can to rectify it, and I'm going to move forwards in a different direction because I genuinely believe that that's for the best. That's a lot, isn't it? You know, that's a massive turn.
That's owning your privilege. And firstly, recognizing that you have privilege is a really difficult thing to do. And then secondly, once you know you have privilege, putting that privilege down is an even harder thing to do. Because it means owning up to the fact that you've committed harm. Unintentionally. From a good place with good intentions, but you've still committed harm. And there is not, I mean, obviously I don't do as many live talks now as I used to do, but when I would do live talks or training, there wasn't one time when a professional didn't come up to me in tears at the end. Saying, you know, oh my God, what have I been doing? My whole career has been actually just hurting people. But I don't judge people by what they've done in the past. I judge, if someone's been given a new set of tools, I judge them by how they use those tools.
Yeah.
If someone puts those tools down and goes back to what they were doing, then I'll judge.
Yeah.
But if someone wants to pick up those new tools and either runs with it or wants to learn how to run with those tools and work with them, then kudos to them. And this isn't about kind of victimizing people's past mistakes. This is about people acknowledging that they have made mistakes, and they're two different things.
Yeah, I like the kind of sorry, Rach. I like the kind of CPS thing of people do well when they can, and it's that, isn't it? We all do the best with the knowledge that we've got. But if you've got new knowledge presented to you, then you need to do the best that you can with that. Sorry, Rachel, go on.
No, it's okay. It was just a thought. So my background before I had children and realised I was autistic was working with deaf and deafblind people, and they have you have to be registered with their NRCPD, which is one of them, like their to make sure that you're registered and you've got adequate training before you're allowed to work with deaf people as an interpreter. Is there, or if there isn't, would it be possible for us to create something like this so that people who delivered training were up to scratch before they were allowed to actually deliver training, and then that training had to be given to professionals before, or staff or whoever, before they were allowed to work with autistic children? Would that be a possibility, do you think?
It's something that's definitely needed, to have some kind of regulatory oversight over this. The only problem with it, without being negative, is that we have a system in the UK, it's the same in the US as well, really, that we have huge charities who gatekeep, who control the narrative in terms of how it flows in and out of government. And in order to set up a regulatory body, you would need to work through them. They already do that. There isn't a regulatory body as such, but they already kind of have set up, like the Autism Good Practice Awards and things like that, and things where they go out to businesses and give them rubber stamps for lots of money and things like that. And the problem is that these charities have a very superficial knowledge and are making huge amounts of money out of us, to be frank. So it is not in their best interest to set up a system which we would want. We would have to, if we were to do that with them, we would have to compromise immensely over what went into the training, who delivered it, and how it was delivered. From my moral standpoint, that wouldn't be good enough, because it would be part and parcel of what we've got now. And that's kind of.
Can we not set something up separate to that?
We could. I mean, we could try, certainly, and then it would be up to us to get people to sign up to it. But you would need need a lot of money in order to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Though. That's the
There's
thing.
a place in Derby, a chap called Martin. What's his last name? Martin. Oh gosh, sorry. I'll have to think of it. I can't think of it right now. But anyway, part of Disability Direct, I don't know if you know, in Derby, and he set up the access card, which is basically disabled people using the card to get access, so disabled access to venues, and they've been getting the different venues to sign up to this. Would that be a possibility for us to use as that
Similar kind of process?
Yeah, do you get what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely could. I mean, like literally today, the four of us could go and set up something and say, if you want to do autism training, like come to us and we'll give you we'll look at your training, and if we think it's good enough, we'll kind of give you a rubber stamp to say that you can use that. Anybody could do that, but you would need the momentum and the kind of money behind it, firstly, to keep checking on those people and making sure that they're delivering suitable information, and the logistics of kind of having to kind of build that up into something which was big enough to be meaningful, if that makes sense. You could start small, certainly, and build up from there, but there's nothing to stop that happening. But I think ultimately it would reach a point where charities would just jump on that bandwagon and do the same thing. And then you would be swamped immediately. Nobody would come to you, because everyone, at the end of the day, we know some of the good that the National Autistic Society does, and we know about the awful things that the National Autistic Society does, and the amount of money that they have as well. Nearly £1 billion in the last decade they've taken in profit. And at the end of the day, people will go flocking to the National Autistic Society because they're the National Autistic Society, because they've been doing this since the 1960s. So you're always competing against something that we as autistic people can't afford to compete against.
We call it the predominant neurotype society.
This is what Aisha and I are finding, that we've got this organic growth with Autistic Parents UK, which we love. You know, we want to help as many people as we can. My heart really swelled when Kieran was talking earlier about, you know, your little neurokin bubble that you can go and vent to, because that's what our peer support groups are. There's a little neurokin bubble that you can just go, oh yeah, and have a load of people come back and go, yeah,
nobody judges you.
I know that flavour of shit. Here we go. You know, which is ace. But equally, it's being run on a volunteer basis solely by autistic parents. So we've got a whole load of busy people with limited spoons. So we're just on board with the fact that it's going to be at its own little pace, and that's okay, because we haven't got loads of money and we haven't got loads of people, and we haven't got loads of people who 7 days a week can just go, yeah, that's fine, we're going to do it, because some of those days we're going to get up and go.
I do have a vision related to that though, because I don't think, even if we had like some kind of national charity to compete, I don't think it would work for us. I mean, Autistic UK have been trying to set up as a big national charity for a long, like decades. It's never worked, and because people keep falling out.
What do you mean?
They're actually doing really well at the moment. Yeah,
or literally falling out.
Not arguing, not literally falling out of the building.
I'm imagining this, like people falling out.
The head office is in a really tall building. Yeah.
But no, so I have this vision that we need a network of lots of small little groups, organizations, charities, however it looks, autistic led groups and charities that all come together on some kind of platform when we need to. Then we can make like national, a bit like the Avengers, you know, like the Avengers all do their own thing and then they come together when there's a big threat kind of thing, because we work in waves like that and we need our own autonomy. And it's, I mean, you'll probably find this with your group. It will get to a certain point where you'll be like, oh my God, this isn't fun anymore, because all I'm now doing is stopping people from arguing, literally, because it gets to a tipping point like that. And I think that's just human behavior as well. But I think particularly for us, because we are always very, very independent and autonomous creatures who, you know, we're all autistic, but we're also very, very strongly, fiercely individual people as well, that coming together on a permanent basis doesn't work for us. So we need to come away and together in kind of ebbs and flows. And I think that's really how autistically we need to do it. And I think that's where we need to go with it. So that would also work with your kind of idea there, Rachel, as well.
Yeah,
like a harpsichord.
Can I I'm aware that we're coming up to our hour, and given that you are really passionate about masking, we did have a specific question around masking, and it was whether you thought that there was a positive or useful amount of masking to do around your own children.
There's a lot of positive tongue biting goes on around my children sometimes. Yes.
Have you got any examples there, Kieran?
No, because I might get arrested and put in prison. There are certain things you can't say on Facebook because you lose your ability to use Facebook.
Yeah. Don't get
usually with the K word. Just imagine Homer Simpson and Bart Simpson. But no, yeah, definitely. When you live in a neurodivergent household, you're going to be bashing up against each other all the time, especially around kind of sensory stuff. It's always like there are 5 people in our house and we all have completely different sensory profiles, which is fun sometimes, and other times it's really, really not fun at all. It's quite distressing. But as an adult, I still have to be the one that's kind of running the house, as you know, with my wife kind of thing. So there are certain times where we do have to mask and we do have to suppress our reaction to stuff in order to meet our children's needs. And that's always going to be the case. At the end of the day, you know, when you decide to have children, you decide that you are going to give up a big portion of your life to them and for them. That's the whole point of it, you know, otherwise you shouldn't really be having them. So the focus needs to be on them for the predominant part. You know, you do have to look after yourself, but they are the center of your attention, as they should be. And it's so I think kind of suppressing your sensory reactions around that is needed. It's not to say that isn't harmful, but it is needed. I don't know if I'd use the word positive, but it's interesting because I do a lot of work with Christy Forbes, the Australian advocate, and she was talking the other day about how her daughter tells her off when she masks. So she said, so she would go into a situation with non-autistic people, and her daughter would say, "Why are you acting like that? You don't act like that. You never act like that. You only act like that around them." And she's actually being told off for it. So there is an argument to say that should we really be modeling what's harmful behavior? Should we be going into certain situations and masking as much if we're safe not to mask? You know, we should be modeling that, you know, that as if we want independent, strong, positive little people that grow up into strong, independent, big people, we need to be modeling positive behavior for them. And we need to model safety, but we also need to model when it's okay to not do those things as well, and when it's safe to not do those things. And at the end of the day, we want our autistic children to grow up and not have to mask at all. You know, or at least to the extent that all humans mask, you know, that we all do context shifting and stuff. And if we don't model that to them, they're never going to learn that. So I would say, yes, there are times when it is useful, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's positive.
Okay.
I have a positive one, if that helps any. Do you want me to share it?
Yeah, go on.
It's quite funny, really, but I think it's funny. Okay, so I have this thing that I've managed to develop that just like when I'm tipping over the edge and I start getting shouty, I've got basically a loop. I guess it's a script that I've developed where I'm going, "I love you all dearly. I'm not shouting at you. I'm getting shouty because I'm overwhelmed. I'm going to leave the room now, but I love you. I'm going to have some time to myself." And then they just sort of look at me and go, "All right." There's me going off, ranting down the hallway, hitting everything. And then later coming out going, "Ta-da! Oh, I'm so gloriously happy now. Hello, beautiful children. How art thou?" Yeah, that's my... That seems to work.
I wouldn't even look at that as masking. I would look at that as you basically putting a big stop in the middle of a situation and saying, "I'm not taking that anymore." You know, handling it really well and handling it positively. But I wouldn't say that you were, because you're going away to fulfill your own needs. So you're not suppressing
I don't want them to
anything.
think I'm walking away from them and leaving.
No,
them.
Of course not. No. But you're not, though, are you?
To be aware that I will be back.
Yeah.
I'm going up the garden to have a rant. Because nobody can hear me there. Well, actually, maybe they can, but I don't care because I can't see them. And so as long as I can't download their soul and read what they're thinking about me, then I don't care.
I think that's actually really healthy modelling, because you're showing your children how to deal with those big feelings that we all have as autistic people that need to get out there somewhere.
Well, this is what I think it's that's it, isn't it? Because we've got a massive trampoline. I chose it because I wanted to be sure that I could get on there too. And my 3-year-old will say, I mean, he's neurodiverse, he's not autistic. I think he's probably mild ADHD like his daddy. And then there's me and Harry, who are autistic with severe ADHD and severe combined ADHD. So can you imagine? Oh, what a house. Imagine we live in a detached place, I can tell you. Anyway, he goes, "Mummy, I need to go out onto the trampoline and get rid of my frustration." And first of all, he said creation. He thought I was saying I'm going out onto the trampoline to get rid of my creation. So that's what he'd say. "Mummy, I need to go on the trampoline to get rid of my creation." And I went, "Do you mean frustration?" "I'm going to get rid of my frustration." Like, "Okay, darling, off you go." So off we went.
It's one of the things that I say to of my 4 children, 2 are particularly explosive, and it's one of the things that I say to them is your reaction is totally valid.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to move you to a space where nobody else is, because I can't allow anybody else to be hurt. But there's nothing wrong with what you're doing, and there's nothing wrong with the emotion you're expressing.
Absolutely.
But we're just going to do it in a safe space, so that nobody accidentally gets hurt.
Does that one have really long limbs? Because mine does. And even when I'm trying to move him, he still manages to punch me or something, a headbutt. I mean, when we went looking for wedding rings, this is like 5 years ago, I had a fat lip. And the people behind the desk were just looking at me going, do you want to come to the side room and have a chat? Is everything okay? Is he making you do this? I was like, no, it's my son. He was in the carrier on my back. Because I carried him because I thought I'd forget where he was. Because then I didn't know we were autistic then. And I knew that I couldn't have him in a pushchair because I knew I'd forget, focusing on something else and everything else drops out. Someone could pinch him. I was like, right, you're having you strapped to my back. So if anything moves, you remind me that you're still there and nobody can pinch you. But yeah, that was the kind of thing. Yeah, so I had to explain that it was my son who headbutted me.
Do you know, it's what you were saying, you know, if as adults, somebody walked into our gardens and saw us bouncing on a trampoline, screaming at the top of our lungs, trying to get rid of our rage and angst, they would think that there was something seriously wrong with us. But they, as non-autistic people, are quite happy to go home and sink a bottle of wine to get rid of their angst. And who's the more healthy kind of version of an adult? I would rather
we don't have that value-laden, symbolic web, do we? So that's what I think we're really lucky that we don't have that we can just go and let it out.
No, I actually find it really weird how socially acceptable it is to be a functioning alcoholic. I find it very, very strange. I'd much rather, for me, and I only do it very occasionally, but when I get incredibly frustrated, the last time I did it was a dentist who was really, really rude to me. I've got rubbish teeth, so I don't tend to get on with dentists, but it was about my kids actually, but he was really rude. And I came home and I said to the kids, right, I'm just, you go and do something upstairs. I'm just going to put on some really, really loud music, but don't worry. And I put on Rage Against the Machine, and then I jump up and down and shout. My neighbours must think that I'm a loon, but I only do it for one song, and then I can go, okay, now I can be a human being again, but I just have to shout really swear words loudly about dentists, and then I can come back and be a human again.
That's very good.
And
can you video that, Ruth? Could get lots of views for that.
It's definitely not me at my best, I have to say.
You could wear a mask, nobody knows it was you. Only us. And then we'll keep you secret.
Except if I put it on the internet now, they're all going to know it's me. Are there any more questions from Facebook, Jules?
Some of them we've already answered. So our conversations have gone a similar way to people's brains and talking about
autistic tangenting at its best.
Yay.
Did get one. Are there any prenatal specialists supporting autistic or neurodiverse mums to be? Aisha answered that one, and she's commented saying we've got a waiting list for small P support. Maybe there needs to be an autistic-led training accreditation staff autistic people, rather than a PhD and no real depth of knowledge. So a few comments. What are the awful things the NAS do, National Autistic Society do? We need to
maybe for the sake of libel, shall we ask them to Google?
Google. Few comments, few really lovely comments.
If people follow me on Twitter, they'll know what the NAS do. It's okay.
Rachel, you're hilarious. You've got some fans there.
Oh God, thank you very much. I love you all.
And Max and I listen to Rage Against the Machine together.
Like a mosh pit.
It's very therapeutic. As a child of the 80s, it's the angriest song that I know.
Very good.
We all need to come around to Ruth's house.
You all need to. My other half is a techie person, so we've got incredible speakers in the front room, and I don't. I live in a terraced house, So my neighbours just occasionally hate me for small amounts of time. and then I go back to being socially acceptable again. I give them biscuits at Christmas, so it's fine.
And headphones.
No, I don't. It's much more satisfying if the music fills the entire house. Is then
No, I mean you giving them
oh,
know,
I
like
see.
In ears.
I could be nice, couldn't I? Yeah, and
give like face mask, earphones, bubble bath.
No.
I'll let you know when it's happening. I'll hang this on my door.
Yeah, I've just spoken to a dentist who sent me into complete overload, and rather than kill him, which is what I quite like to do, I'm just going to listen to this music instead. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, Kieran.
It's okay.
That was lots of fun. I hope that the Facebook audience enjoyed it as well. And we're going to do another one in a month, aren't we? We need to sort the dates out. Kieran and I send lots of emails. Kieran's very patient with me while I send him a bajillion emails. And in a month's time, I haven't got one of my children's birthdays, so win-win. We will do it.
Have you ever forgotten one of their birthdays?
No, well, what I was saying to Kieran at the beginning was I didn't forget his birthday, but my brain does this thing where it forgets that I can't be in two places at the same time, and that I can't separate myself in half and do two things. So I know that the 9th of April is my son's birthday, but I forgot that meant I couldn't also be doing Kieran at the same time as caring for my son. But he's got a switch, so he doesn't care. It's fine. I haven't been a bad mum. I've just plugged him into technology.
See, my son's birthday is the day after Halloween, and because I spent so many of my spoons on Halloween, the day after just didn't really feel like it existed. Does that make sense? And I'm so glad the one whose birthday it was 2, because he didn't really care. But I did learn, thinking I really need to get somebody to help me cope with these 2 days a little better, because when he's old enough to be aware, he's going to be like, yo mum, where's my birthday?
You just do one giant combined. Isn't that what people do whose birthdays are at Christmas time? You just do one celebration and
merge them together.
That's amazing. What a great idea.
For a birthday.
That's good, isn't it? Yeah, actually, one of my best friends, her birthday's Halloween.
And you could play your music, Ruth, couldn't you?
See? Perhaps
that
not
would scare
everybody. Birthday party. I'm not sure how appropriate it is. I have recently given up, and
who's going to do the bleeping?
It's no fun if I'm bleeping. I'm going to be swearing along.
No, I mean, you can be swearing, but someone has to bleep. Someone has put some sort of card in front of you that says bleep.
Don't.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Right.
A couple of last
things.
Yeah, go on, Jules.
Are we all diagnosed? Sorry, it's that. And
are we what? Sorry.
On asking whether we're all diagnosed, and what are our thoughts on self-diagnosis. So I don't know if we've got time for those ones, or if we're going to bring them up in the next session.
It's up to you, Kieran. Have you got
fine.
5 minutes to do that? Okay. So fire away.
I'm diagnosed, and my view on self-diagnosis is that it's absolutely valid. There are such huge barriers to diagnosis, particularly for certain groups, particularly for women, for people who present in a kind of, who are internalizers rather than externalizers, from different marginalized groups, the Black community, the Asian community, all different groups. Massive barriers to diagnosis for them. So self-identification is absolutely valid. And I run a Facebook group for late diagnosed people who is also open to people who are exploring their diagnosis as well and self-identify. So, I think it's absolutely valid.
Yes. I always think to myself, well, there's no diagnosis for being PNT, is there?
No, that's the thing. Yeah, I'm self-identified as autistic. I don't have a formal diagnosis, but I feel happy, given that what we were saying quite a bit there in the chat about the large amount of professionals' actual understanding and knowledge around autism. I'm quite happy with the amount that I've learned and interacted.
It's for you though, isn't it, Ruth?
Yeah.
It's for you. It's for your benefit.
It should be.
It's my identification. And you know, I put a piece up on our main page today that kind of acceptance for me was like coming home. You know, it was that everything, and I think a lot of people find the same, don't they, that when you find the autistic community and then it's everything that we were talking about, you know, oh, I do that, oh, it's that, oh my goodness, you know, I just thought that I was a bit broken and a bit weird. And then you're going, oh, wait a minute, I'm not at all, I'm a completely fully functioning and wonderful autistic person, not a broken
that was really lovely what you wrote, Ruth. It was really lovely.
Thank you.
It was very well articulated.
Thank you. I hope that my daughter will read it and still feel loved and cherished. I try not to, you know, paint her in anything other than the gorgeous, wondrous light that she is. But I'm always mindful of that when I'm writing, that I'm not trying to either co-opt her identity or kind of bash her, you know. That it's marvelous, and for me it's just been amazing. It's turned my life around, you know. It's given me all different.
Do you ever sorry, I just wanted to add, if that's okay, about the self-identity thing, and there are a lot of people in my experience when I joined like groups on Facebook, where there were, you know, a few people who just wouldn't, you had to have a diagnosis to be almost accepted. And then, you know, we're sort of doing the studies that I'm doing at the minute. I'm doing the postgrad in autism with Sheffield Hallam University with the wonderful Dr. Luke Bearden, who's an excellent tutor, and he has sort of given me a better perspective, where I actually see myself as a valid, you know, and what's the word I'm looking for? A valid and you know, I have things to contribute, useful things to contribute, and that I no longer feel that I've got to have that sort of deficit mindset or apologize for being autistic, or even have to tell anybody that I'm autistic. Because as like you said, Kieran, that, you know, I have discovered that, you know, when you disclose it, you have to be prepared for the response that you get, where the hierarchy, the value laden symbol, web that the PNC have, where they thought you were up here, and then you say you're autistic, and it's almost like you just go ka-choom, 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 and you can see it in their eyes that you've just dropped. Like, you know, it's like playing a computer game and you've just dropped a few levels, or Snakes and Ladders if we're going to go 80s, and you've gone down a snake, you know. So but the thing I took from it, I just thought, okay, so self identity, this is for me, this is for my benefit. I don't need to tell anybody that I'm autistic. However, it is useful for gaining access to things like benefits under the Equality Act. However, I don't feel it's actually equal, because I have to prove that I'm disabled in order to be protected under that act. Yet the other minority groups who are listed in there don't have to prove that. I don't know if that would be something that I feel needs to be tackled, because why have I got to prove that I'm struggling in order to get support, when other people don't have to prove their religion or their race or sexual orientation or whatever, you know? I just find that just seems to baffle me a bit, really. So,
I wonder specifically with autism if that kind of thing comes to functioning labels. Is why we need to prove that we're disabled, because of course so many people are high functioning.
Because
well, how do you prove anxiety?
I mean,
how do you prove anxiety?
How do you prove any of it? How do you prove any of it? It's a fallacy, and again, you know, goes back to what we were talking about earlier, about antiquated ideas and outmoded theories around how we are and who we are and what our experiences of life are like, because it's all being judged from the external. I mean, you know, that's the whole thing with functioning labels, isn't it? Is that it's an external observation. How well are you faking it is what it comes down to.
So I can have a heart rate of 172 and look like this. My husband and my mother both don't see it, and until I showed my husband my watch, he was just like, you just stood there, you're not doing anything. I don't even get up to 172 when I'm on the cross trainer. So I was like, well, it was the dust that triggered my anxiety. And so my heart rate shot up to 172. And this happens regularly, it's like basically being on a roller coaster of chemicals, a fight and flight. And even my physio looked at my watch and just said, oh my God, you're basically in a state of fight and flight all the time. And I was like, yeah, I think that's probably why I'm so slim. because it's just that, okay, I'm just constantly burning stuff. So anyway, sorry, I'll shut up now. Honestly.
No, thank you for you. Jules, did you want to weigh in on that, or would you rather not?
Yeah, so I'm happy to. So yes, I found out that I started identifying as autistic after I was told that I could potentially be after my son started down an assessment route himself at being at nursery, and the health visitor, and then my GP. Luckily, my GP, he's retiring this year, but he's one of those few men that Kieran was talking about that are over 50 and do actually take on board and say, I need to know more information about this. And over the years that I've been with him, he's been marvellous. But yes, I'm waiting for my formal assessment. But one of the comments on here, I've absolutely found my tribe in the autistic community, and definitely relate to that one. From the minute I started, because I've got lots of family members who are autistic, and we've always thought that others who have never been diagnosed are also autistic. And then when I started reading about how female traits differ to male traits and the masking and everything, I was like, check. Wow, yes, I do that. This health visitor might be onto something, and she's marvellous as well. I think I've been very lucky.
Lovely.
I haven't experienced that. Well, I haven't been through my formal test yet. I could, I'm not counting my chickens, but I think that so far I've been very lucky in the information I've been able to get. And yeah, just waiting for that. I think that like Ruth says, it's not really. I don't think I need the validation from me as such. It's more, I think I'm just doing it for everybody else.
Yeah. And you might you have got small chance that professionals might not agree with you, but that's just one person's judgment, and it's quite likely one neurotypical person's judgment of what neurotype you fall into. You're still us, Jules.
That's the thing. I mean, with the whole diagnostic process, I've never understood the whole why so many parents and autistic people are invested in gatekeeping that and saying that, if you haven't got a piece of paper from a professional, then you're not qualified to talk about anything. Because at the end of the day, that professional is not looking inside your head. They're not taking a blood sample from you. They're not running a DNA test on you. They are asking you some questions and you're answering. And if you fit their tick list, that means you get a big tick. That's all that's happened.
Yeah.
And it's some people need that for that validation. Some people, like Jules said, need it because other people don't accept it. So that bit of paper becomes useful to say, well, actually, yes, I am. And then, like Rachel said, that can be useful for benefits. Not everybody can access benefits because of it, because it's a very complicated process. But to gatekeep that is ridiculous. And to invest too much value in something which has very little value in the first place, because it is a very, very limited and narrow criteria, because it excludes so many people, and it all comes down to what one person thinks, really, and how one person interprets those questions in the diagnostic manual. It's really subjective, and people shouldn't be saying like you're not autistic because you haven't got a diagnosis. I was autistic before I got my diagnosis. My piece of paper did not change anything. It just means that somebody else looked at me and said, oh yeah, you probably are, and tick. That's it. That's all it means.
I've got celiac disease as well, and I don't have that formally on a bit of paper because I was going to doctors for 1.5 years and they couldn't work out what it was. And when I was saying, do you think it's gluten? Do you think I might be celiac? Because my mum and my sister are celiac. They wouldn't do the tests. And I was so ill that I just went, well, I'm just going to give it up and we'll see what happens. And suddenly I was better. And then a doctor said, oh, well, we can run the test now, but you have to eat wheat for 6 weeks. I said, well, now if I have a spoonful of wheat, it makes me throw up for 24 hours and gives me a migraine where I would literally rather die. So I'm not going to do that. So they went, well, it will never be on your paperwork then. But I'm just a celiac, whether the doctor agrees with me or not. And if I eat wheat, I'll still be sick, even though I haven't got a bit of paper that says that that's what happens. And it's the same for me. It's the same with my autism. It doesn't matter if somebody agrees with me or not, because that's who I am. And I don't currently feel that I would benefit from external validation.
I think if somebody asks you to prove that you are diagnosed that isn't part of some kind of benefit system or something like that, like a person on the street or someone on the internet, that says more about them than it does about you.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Sorry, my headphones are just giving up and I can't, my phone's going a bit weird. So I often think like using the quite like using analogies, but so gravity, before it was discovered, we were not all floating around midair, and then Newton discovered it and suddenly we all hit the floor. Do you get what I mean? That's that kind of mindset, isn't it?
That's the thing, isn't it? Is that we are who we are, whether we have somebody outside say that or not.
The problem is the narrative kind of that parents are quite often handed is that, see, nobody talks about autistic babies. Nobody really like we might start talking about autistic toddlers, but that whole, from being in utero all the way through to kind of being a toddler, that whole bit seems to be missed out. There's a huge gulf there, but those kids are autistic. They're just nobody's spotted it yet. That's the only difference, or parents might have spotted it, but no professional has. And it's these things don't just suddenly magically appear.
No.
But from a professional sense, it's like the day from a professional narrative, it's like the day we give you the diagnosis is the day we can start giving you support. But no, we needed the supports the day before and the week before and the month and year before, and they weren't there. And not that those supports really mean anything really, but in the grand scheme of things do not start happening just because someone gives you a piece of paper. Well, they shouldn't. It should all be needs based, and that's. I would like to think one day we would get to the point around kind of neurodivergencies where we don't even need labels and things, that it's about meeting need. And that's that would be a truly human thing to do, to meet other humans' needs where they are.
Well, wouldn't it be, if we actually create a world where the neurotypical and the neurodiverse had balance, that if that came about, the world would actually function better. And a lot of the problems we have, it's like discrimination and what's the word, like the isms, racism and things like that, would probably not, I don't know whether they'd be gone, but I think it'd be a lot less, because we don't judge people. We haven't got that value laden system, the sort of low arousal approach. I think a lot of that could be very beneficial for the non-autistic people. But if the non-autistic people have their way all the time, then it's actually damaging to the other what's the word? I'm sorry, I'm getting tired. It's like the other neurotypes. Why can't we just do it? Why can't we just do it the way that actually meets more need, rather than staying with what we know? Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making sense.
I think a lot of it's convenience, isn't it? And doing what we've always done. But you're right. When we look into the additional but the differing needs of autistic people, that's still going to be beneficial for predominant neurotype people. So it makes more sense to do things our way, but it's just that's not the way it's done currently. It's not convenient to turn the whole ship around.
No. I think the only way it will change is if we have parallel hierarchies rather than linear hierarchies. And that's because at the minute we have a whole world which is set up around productivity and around a very small group of people using the productivity of other people to make them lots of money. Until that changes, nothing's going to change, I don't think.
And for as long as they keep autism negative, then they can sell the parents who are just desperate to help their children.
It is a product.
Yeah.
Neurodiversity has become a product in the business world. And around employment and recruitment. It's a buzzword. That's an autism is a buzzword. It makes people money. It's $7 billion industry around us. Look at us all. We're all poor. Who's sitting on that money? I would love to know.
That's it. Right.
The one with a very big bottom. Sorry.
we've overrun by half an hour, so everybody watching has had an extra half an hour of marvelous time with us. I hope that you enjoyed it, but we will finish up. So thank you very, very much for joining us, and we will see you again in a month with another one of these. So for the people watching, and we'll put the topic up within the next week or so, and if you want to send questions in beforehand for us to put in our little question cache, then that would be excellent.
Can I just say one more thing, Ruth? Sorry to be a pain. Am I allowed to mention my TIKTOK?
Of course, go ahead.
So I've got a TikTok. I think they call it a platform. I'm 42, so I'm sorry I'm not down with the kids, okay? But yeah, it's a TikTok platform where I basically talk about myself. It's the Me show. It's called Rachelosaurus, and so Rachel, RACHELO, as in all one word. I'm not very good at doing this. I should have just written it down and held it up. So Rachelosaurus, I'm on TikTok, and I'm talking about my experiences of being autistic, the things I've learned. I reference all the people who I've learned things from, and some of it's comedy value, some of it's a little bit darker, but I think it's important to sort of share both sides of the coin, and I hope it's useful if anybody sees it. So there you go.
Have you got a link you can put in the comments afterwards?
Yes, I can pop that in. Yeah, thank you, Ruth.
We'll add that on as well then. And hopefully, I'm sure that everybody watching is already following Kieran, and if you're not, then you should do.
Absolutely.
Kieran has mastered Twitter, which I was saying I'm adamantly refusing to do. So you can follow Autistic Parents on Facebook, because that's the only one that I work. But Kieran is over on Twitter. I think that Aisha does some stuff on Instagram for us as well. So follow us through various platforms if you want to. Thank you again.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
Lovely to
Bye-bye.
for your time. Take care. Bye.